Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Matt Erickson, also known as Kingpilled. He is a Orthodox Christian and right-wing podcaster, and in this conversation we talk about the ins and outs of right-wing politics. What is percolating on the right, especially with regard to young people discovering the Orthodox religion, and also alternative or older ways of understanding the process and reality of political power. You can find Matt Erickson's work linked in the description. He's a great guy. He's got a lot to say, and he draws upon a wealth of reading, knowledge, and he's got a lot of pluck and just a happy disposition. So it's great to hang out with him and to listen to him. You can find his work down there in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Matt Erickson, the Kingpilled. What's going on in the world from your point of view? Are you monitoring the situation?
Oh, I am monitoring. I'm monitoring hard. I think I don't know. I tend to have a the nothing ever happens guys have always bothered me because I'm like, there's so many things happening, but in this particular instance of the last week or so, I've developed an appreciation for them because they've been some of our strongest posters in combating the just insane hysteria that has taken over a lot of people who I otherwise generally have a lot of respect for. But you know, they've kind of lost the plot. They've gotten caught up in all the narrative and sort of lost sight of the bigger picture of everything that's going on.
Yeah. I periodically I find myself what the kids call black-pilled. Where I just start getting this massive amount of anxiety about the world, and I have to consciously say, you know what, I'm absorbing a bunch of information that doesn't have to do with my direct environment, and I'm allowing that to leach into my direct environment, so I need to find some buffering, Britain or the UK or whatever they call themselves nowadays. They just legalized full-term abortion. Mm-hmm. And they're about to legalize that, whatever they're going to call MAID, right? So they're just suiciding the West, literally, while importing massive amounts of, to all intents and purposes, criminals or anti-Western law abiders, maybe. They have their own laws, they have their own things. So they're basically replacing their population full steam. And that's just like very disturbing to me. And I'm like, okay, I need to think about something else. The other thing to think about is what's happening in the Middle East, which no matter what you do, you're going to have the wrong opinion on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I did a live stream with a friend of mine last night, and I woke up this morning and checked the comments, and it was there are a lot of people who don't really like what I have to say. They've accused me of being on the Thiel payroll, and let me tell you, I would desperately love to be on the Thiel payroll. Please give me access to that fund with all of these accumulated Thiel bucks that I have.
What aligns you with the Thiel bucks? What opinion, generally speaking? Like implants? You want to be a robot?
No, I have absolutely zero interest in having any sort of implants. Though I will say that were I to have some sort of accident that quadriplegic to me, my opinion would probably change. You know, the way I feel about Neuralink would probably be very different if I was paralyzed versus if I'm not. The thing that probably aligns me most with them is one, I don't think Peter Thiel is a supervillain. I think I understand why people think he's a supervillain, and I think that he has I think that there's the possibility that he turns out to be a supervillain because I think the future isn't determined yet, that we are in the process of actively determining the future. And, so dogmatically declaring one thing or the other to be so, I think is probably a little naive. But I think he's extremely understood. I think he's far more influential than people realize, kind of ironically. People think he's like the supervillain. But they don't actually see his fingerprints where his fingerprints are. And then broadly, I guess it was about a year and a half ago or so, I started doing this big deep dive into the so-called PayPal mafia. And I've been familiar with them for a while. I spent time living in California and have always been a big fan of tech and been kind of plugged into the tech scene. And I started getting this sense that there was something, Silicon Valley is this, what's the term? Um, what's the term for if you say like the hill to refer to Capitol Hill? There's like Silicon Valley. There's the place Silicon Valley, and then there's the concept of Silicon Valley.
Is
I
it
started.
Syndochi?
It's
Synodochi or something
it's
like
something like that. Yeah. I started realizing there's kind of something going on here with the Silicon Valley thing. There's a lot of people think Silicon Valley is a certain way, and it is for sure. But I started noticing a pretty large contingent of people who I would have otherwise expected to probably be just some kind of bland variant of shitlib, starting to really get pretty outspoken about being supportive of Trump, or at least leaning toward this. And a year and a half ago, this was completely unthinkable. They were very outspoken about immigration and the problems at the southern border. The border needs to be secured. They were getting more and more increasingly critical of the Biden administration. And it turns out, after I'd been digging into this for a while, then Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz released a podcast where they basically confirmed this, that the tech leaders, broadly speaking, had pretty much decided to nope out of the whole Democrat Party apparatus. Now, there's some tech leaders, others who haven't. So I was sort of trying to start kind of taxonomizing the Silicon Valley world. And I think that there's a particular type of thinker that gets drawn there and kind of winds up there. And that person doesn't fall super cleanly into the really rough political categories that we kind of default to generally. They're not right wing really, but they're also not regime shitlibs. Even if they may have had a past in that world, there's something about being at the forefront of innovation and then also having a little autism and being very systems oriented that inclines a number of people into this sort of third category that I think Balaji Srinivasan has called the gray tribe. And that was where they're not red, they're not blue, they're gray. They're the tech world sort of.
Are they like utilitarian based, do you think?
Kind of,
politics are downstream of their ambition?
A little bit, like yeah, very much. I called them the grillionaires because they're the billionaires who just want to grill. Like like Elon, Elon just wants to shoot his rockets up in the air. He just wants to. Yeah. And the thing is, if you have these massive ambitions,
well, and into various uteri, but
fair, yes. Well, that's kind of another example, like the avowed pronatalism. Say what you will about the particular practice of the way he practices his pronatalism, but being an outspoken pronatalist automatically puts him at odds with what people would generally expect from regime shitlibs. I mean, that's been a huge the anti-natalist push, like you're talking about in the UK. The anti-natalist push is utterly predominant, and again, especially a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I kind of started down this little journey.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know how sincere Hillary Clinton was being, but she did. There was a clip floating around from her, and I don't know why she won't go away. I don't even know if it's her anymore. Maybe just an echo in the machine. But she was saying these people want to promote having babies. That's what the immigrants are for. She kind of made this, soft part loudly.
Yeah.
Misstep or direct thing. And could we just it's a crude term, but you're using it in a technical capacity. What is a shitlib? Can we put our finger on that? If we put a glove on maybe first, but
yeah. It's kind of a sort of like a catch-all for me for like the like a generic normie lib, kind of like the default regime position, but they're dogmatic about it. That would probably be the way that
in this house we believe yada
yes,
yada yada.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. Yeah. The people who have those signs in their yards. That's the type of person. And it's kind of a broad term for me. It's just you have everyone has their boogeyman or the person who they think is the villain, or they're different disparaging categories. And so shitlib is just kind of a stand-in for like a mouthpiece of the Democratic Party or or Davos or that sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's particularly important to have that category because those are the people who, generally speaking, are representing power, or those ideas, the people who mouth those ideas end up being in positions of power or have been for the last, I don't know, since Obama at least, right? So the shitlib are the bureaucrats. They are like that kind of nest of assumptions and proclamations are kind of, when we talk about the managerial elite, this is their
Yes.
moral compass or their moral flag, literally, that they wave to signal that they are part of that clan.
Yeah.
Their acceptable opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess probably I haven't thought about it this in depth before, but as I'm kind of taking it apart in my head, I think that the shitlib is probably, in my mind, when my usage of it is probably there's like a shallowness to it. It's the person that just kind of has the like their received settings, the default settings that they just kind of receive from their environment, and then they're very arrogant and dogmatic about it, and they think that they think you're an idiot if you don't like they think that you're sheltered if you don't understand these very obvious things. When it's like when you're having a conversation with someone like this, it's like no man, you're the sheltered one. You're the one who's never existed outside your bubble.
Yeah, they're very Dunning-Kruger, very midwit, coded, kind of. I guess that's the way that they present themselves, or that's who we're speaking about. People who loosely get into that position, but the tech bros will mouth certain of those things because it maybe feels good or it's the right thing to say to a certain extent. But once they look under the hood or once it interrupts their plans, then they'll reformulate their ideas accordingly. And Elon is probably the foremost of that. Zuckerberg kind of did a weird switcheroo. Bezos is kind of masculine coded, but he did send up his plastic dolls into space for whatever reason. And his wife, on the other side of it, his wife or his ex-wife rather, is basically funding a large part of the shitlibbery afoot in schools and stuff like that. So
yeah, I would say probably when I started kind of digging into the Silicon Valley MAGA world, and I predicted late 2023, early 2024, as I started getting into this, I was like, okay, there's something that's happening here. And it might be kind of hard for someone to go back in time and remember what that environment was like a year and a half or so ago. But at the time, the notion that you would have mass support, like that you would have outspoken, avowed support and donations for Donald Trump coming out of major Silicon Valley billionaires and tech leaders and stuff was unthinkable. It was completely unthinkable. But I'm watching them and I'm like, there's something here. Number one, I'm starting to see the fingerprints of Curtis Yarvin all over the place. More and more people who are talking about him or invoking him or speaking in kind of Yarvinian ways.
Yeah.
And obviously Yarvin came out of that world. And I guess, and maybe I'm kind of a little all over the place here, but another thought that just occurred to me was on my show at the time, my co-host and I were discussing the generations and the personalities, characteristics of each successive generation since the boomers. And one thing that an idea we were unpacking is that the boomers as a generation have stayed on way too way too long. They got themselves up to the top of all of the various institutions, and then they've just held on for dear life. We haven't had a cycling out. We're not getting new blood. Which, as someone who's enjoyed studying people like Curtis Yarvin and Italian elite theorists and such things, I'm like, okay, hold on a second here. What we're seeing is an elite class that is beginning to ossify and detach from the rest of the population, which if you know your Pareto, this signals you should probably start expecting there's going to be a forced circulation of the elite at some point. It's going to have to happen. Because you're going to get total social collapse otherwise. A society can't function without an elite. It will always have an elite. And the question is that going to be a high quality elite or a low quality elite? And then, and then I guess maybe you could do a Punnett square here. Is it a high quality elite or a low quality elite? And are they moral or are they amoral? And so
meritocratic good or meritocratic evil or...
Yes, yeah, and then well, and then what is when you invoke a meritocracy? Meritocracy according to what standard? What is considered like what's the metric for merit? Is it sheer efficiency? Is it
Elite human capital is one word that's floating around.
Right. So what was I thinking here with
well, you were going through the generations. So the boomers,
generations,
have taken the helm. Gen X is kind of ridden in their wake, and adopted certain things or kind of gone their own way. The millennials are they're in their 30s now. That's probably you're in the millennial sphere, right?
Yeah.
So I see people in the millennials trying to figure out what the barometer is. Since 2020, since the Great Awakening, I think a lot of that forced the issue on, are you going to think deeply about these issues or are you going to go along with the issues? And both the Black Lives Matter stuff, the social stuff, the trans stuff, the gender stuff, and then also, what's the other thing? COVID, the tyrannical police state. The same people who are out there saying no kings are saying get vaxxed or else we're gonna curb you.
Right.
We're gonna put you in jail. So and that's really boomer coded. So what's your gauge on like the millennial sphere? I think there's probably some certain thinkers that would be like the attractors or the concentrated options that we have. Would like Destiny or that Vouch guy or somebody like that be among the people that are kind of new but powerful, or is it JD Vance, and who else would it be? AOC?
Yeah, JD Vance is. I think JD Vance is probably going to wind up being the sort of the archetypal millennial. It's kind of interesting. I realized that within the administration, at least around the time this realization hit me, which was around the inauguration, you have the archetypal boomer in Donald Trump. You have the archetypal Gen X guy in Elon Musk. And then you've got the archetypal millennial in JD Vance. I thought that was kind of interesting. So where's the Zoomer, I wonder?
Barron.
Yeah, Barron. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Barron. Yeah. So you've got all four of them right there.
Yeah.
Well, one thing. So Eric Weinstein, who I've enjoyed, I've not enjoyed. I like some of his observations. He, your mileage may vary with him, but he has one concept that he introduced to the discussion, I suppose, is the concept of the ego, the embedded growth obligation. So you have these institutions that were established with an embedded growth obligation. The idea that they're going to grow, number go up forever. They're always going to grow, but many of these have hit a saturation point. There's no natural growth available within them anymore. Whether you're talking on the financial economic side of things, or in terms of for example. You might have like a lawyer, like a law office, and you can only have so many partners, and then if there's not another space for another partner, then you might have someone go off and start a new firm. Well, then there's only a space for so many firms, but at the same time, both Gen X and millennials, and to a lesser extent the Zoomers, the myth was kind of breaking by the time it got to the Zoomers. But we were born into this world where it's like you go on this track. You go to school, then you go to college, then you get your job, and then you get your 401k and your pension, and you work, and that whole thing. But that whole system itself was was an ego. It was an embedded growth, had an embedded growth obligation. And we hit a saturation point for a whole wide variety of reasons. But the way I kind of visualize it is you had the boomers who worked their way up to the top of society, and then you have Gen X.
They built a lot along the way. I think boomers need to be given their fair due. They did a ton of work and a ton of expansion in the arts and culture, and fucking up the world, but also integrating the world with itself. For all the tyrannical aspects of that particular reigning ideology, there was a lot of good that's paved. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice, and we overlook what needs to replace it if we don't give it its due.
Yes. And I think, I was very critical of the boomers for a while, and then I started seeing more and more conversation that was turning the boomers into the supervillain. And I was like, now hold on a second here. There's lots of good stuff about the boomers, and we're going to miss them a lot when they're gone. They obviously had major shortcomings, but they themselves were born into a pretty messed up world. They were easily the most the victims of the most sophisticated psychological operations spanning decades of any generation ever. They were one-shotted by mass media before they ever even had a chance. So I think they definitely deserve a break, and I think that we're going to end up looking back on them more fondly than we do at the moment. They like I don't want to say that they're as a generation they're faultless, but this sort of dysfunctional system that is starting to crack at the seams now is something that was honestly the bones of it were built by probably the silent generation and the like the scaffolding of it, and then the boomers sort of filled it out, but then there was no natural way for them to exit stage left when the time came.
It was very end of history and the last man.
Yes.
And so if you get into that parable, if you get into the parable of the end of history, which of course is it's Fukuyama, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He talks about, capitalism, liberal democracy. That's probably the most perfectible system. But there's also trapped within that sense of no history. There's just this collective slide into more and more hedonism, weaker and weaker characters, the adulation of weakness. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And I don't think that it's not fulfilling. So I think that the natural crack of that is what's called the meaning crisis. Jordan, exemplified by Jordan Peterson's splash on the stage, resurrecting or giving a bridge to this meaningless post-meaning world, back to the mythological, back to the religious, and then starting the conversation for the new people, for the younger people. What is meaning? And then also, what is power? What are these systems? What is responsibility? What is action? What is how far how much should I care about all these successive systems from myself to the world? And what's the correct way of having collective identity, collective action, personal identity, personal action? All those questions start coming into the scene. But I'm taking the mic from you. You were talking about the boomers, embedded growth obligation.
Yeah,
Gen X kind of comes in.
The Fukuyama brain is something that I've been hammering a lot recently, and I think there's like you're saying there's a direct line between that end of history notion and the meaning crisis. Because if we're at the end of history, then where do we go from here?
What do we create your own? It's a smorgasbord of religious symbols that just mean whatever you want them to mean.
Yeah, what are we building toward? What's our aspiration? Where are we going? There was a frontier. Go settle the frontier.
Yes.
And then, okay, now we've settled all the frontiers. So what next? And then also as that mind virus takes hold, then people begin opposing the idea of finding that what's next, because no, we're at the end of history. We don't need to go find what's next. We don't need to go to Mars. We're just fine here. That's dangerous. That's silly. That's wasteful. Look at all the problems we have here. And not to say that I think it'd be cool to go to Mars, but and I think there's legitimacy probably to the notion that there's the 6,000 year, 12,000 year disaster cycles, and we seem to be coming up on something like that, and being able to have something off planet or whatever. But I don't really try to concern myself about these things, because an old friend of mine used to say that never bet on the end of history, because it only happens once, and when it does, you're gonna have much bigger problems. Never bet on the end of the world. So back to the generations. So there's something I noticed about the characteristics of the generations. You have the boomers, and I don't know, I haven't really looked at this back before the boomers. This is a pattern I've identified in the last 4 generations. So you have boomers and millennials are both idealistic as a generation. Their generational personality is very idealistic. The millennials, you could say they're kind of like echo boomers. They're like the millennials are the generation that tried to live up to the boomers' idealistic aspirations the most, and Gen X was characterized more by you can kind of see this in the art of the era, the sort of renegade latchkey kid. They were the first generation who really grew up with both parents going to work. and women entering the workforce, and that was very I think disruptive and destabilizing. Having kids come home from school and just have to sort of entertain themselves. There's a kind of a romantic mythology that built up around it, but I think there was also a lot of it corresponded with a massive rise in divorce rates, and so the Gen X generation.
Well, there's a lot of that typifies Gen X with its do-it-yourself kind of ideology, philosophy. There's no continuity. There's no like mother teaching you your tongue, father teaching you your morals. There's this absence. There's this gap that I think kind of Lords of the Fly-ishly Gen X kind of feels themselves are at the frontier, kind of anti-authoritarian, but want to assemble their own thing, have kind of a freedom and kind of a, I can kind of see like the different disruptions that bubble. And then through media, through social media, eventually social media, through the computer, we kind of connected with each other with these different subcultures and stuff like that, which of course, all these different patterns were found in the boomers and previously, but there's something about Gen X that's very trendy. Like we're very trendy trendsetters kind of.
And also Gen X was the first generation to really begin, I don't know how you'd say this, like colonizing or populating social media. They were the original forums, and they're also very big into video games, and then you get into computer programming and engineering and cryptography and all that sort of thing. So like Yarvin, I think, is another character who's very he typifies Gen X in a lot of ways. Not to say that every Gen Xer is going to identify with him, but he's unmistakably Gen X, and I think he is kind of a voice for a lot of people who are in that Silicon Valley world, whether they know who he is or not. He when he speaks, it resonates. Now, tying this into politics, you had this managerialist. We've been in this growing, developing managerialist, whatever you want to call it. And if there's
blob,
one thing,
some people call it,
the blob. And if there's one thing that tech entrepreneurs and founders and VC guys and that sort of crowd, if there's one thing that they get, it is bureaucracy. They deal with it constantly. They're always and one thing I started picking up on as I was following, this is back before Twitter made likes private, so you could actually go through and like look at someone's likes. And when I started digging into this PayPal mafia thing, I started going through all these different guys. There's literally a Wikipedia for it. I didn't make up the term. But
I think there's an Esquire article or something like that. That's where it was, it was kind of, they were the IDW. They got IDW'd at some point.
Right. And I started seeing them. They were the main issues that they were opposing or that they were getting really concerned about was national security concerns with regards to China and AI and then, quote unquote cryptocurrency. And then also they were starting to make lots of noises about being immigration restrictionist, which kind of makes sense. Like if you live in a major city and you just want to code, like you just want to sit and build things, you live for business, which also gives you kind of there's like an extra neuroplasticity, I think, with a lot of that. There's like a selection bias for picking people who have a lot of neuroplasticity and are kind of a little bit amoral. They're heavily overrepresented in the tech space. And I don't mean immoral, just amoral, kind of neutral, gray, third party. And if you're living in that world and like you have your whatever your project is that you're working on, and every day you walk out and you have to step over like some guy jacking it in the street and human piles of crap everywhere and everything, like that's going to be pretty radicalizing. I don't want to live in this world. We got big important things we have to build. We've got AI. We've got crypto. There's the inflation and the dollar and all this sort of thing. So I was recognizing that the political binary that has dominated American politics for however far you want to go back, it's beginning to realign. It's changing. We're seeing the wings of the American political bird are starting to morph into something different. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's different than what we've been in the past. And if you're assuming that the future is going to be like the past, and you're just kind of operating on that program, you're probably going to miss something. So I predicted that JD Vance was going to be vice president, was going to be the vice presidential pick in
Really?
probably February. I think it was something like that, because it just made too much sense. It was he was too perfect, too. He was very obviously representative of the Silicon Valley world, but then he also is former military. He's he was a successful senator, and it just he's
Great
from
origin
Ohio.
story that you even made a movie of his childhood, so he's
Yeah.
got the cinematic aspect going on.
Yeah. And then he also overlapped really heavily with the like the Heritage Foundation world, which represents much more of the verging toward the more Christian nationalist kind of sect of the broader right wing.
Yeah.
And so he was just kind of he checked too many boxes. It seemed like it was going to happen. Although I have to admit, the day that it was announced, I chickened out at the last minute. And I said it was going to be Glenn Youngkin. That was who I made my last bet on. And so I was right and I was wrong. But so
just to clarify again, and I love this conversation. We're bouncing all over the place. We're demanding a lot of neuroplasticity from the audience, which is a good challenge for them out there. You said that there's something idealistic about the millennials and the boomers. Could you get a little bit into how the millennials are more idealistic, or like what typifies their particular idealism?
Yeah, so I am a millennial, and I think it's kind of a received sense more than something that I could necessarily directly put my finger on. But let me see if I could think of some examples. Even the whole I was born in '88, so I'm 36.
Okay.
So I'm like square in the middle of the millennial generation. I also my parents were really young. They're both Gen Xers, and I grew up with like my aunts and uncles that I lived with for a while when I was younger were in their teens, mid to late teens.
Okay.
So I'm very Gen X influenced. But and I skipped a grade in school, so I was around older people mostly. So even things like BLM and Antifa and those sorts of movements are they are themselves, I think, very idealistic. It's the millennial generation is, if you look at like a lot of the art that everyone consumes, and there's this kind of utopian notion. It's like the millennials were raised in the boomer world, and they want to believe in it. They want to live in the world that the boomers gave to them. They want to be in that end of history world. Gen X is more cynical as a broad generation. Of course, there are individual exceptions, but as a broad generation, Gen X is like, well, we had to do it on our own. We had to build our own stuff, and we didn't fit into the narrow constraints here, so we kind of went off and did all of our own things. Like John Hughes movies.
Yeah, go on.
John Hughes movies are kind of like the Gen X spirit.
Yeah,
which
and
is
then following up on that, like Office Space and Fight Club, where I think there's a meme that's floating around about like these Gen Xers, they were given everything and all they wanted to do was destroy it, and that's kind of like, why would I get in this soul-sucking job? And then the people who are criticizing that are like, well, you had all the things, but you had all the things. Now we're not going to get all the things. Yeah,
like the millennials are like, well, I would love to have a 9-to-5 job and go to
affordable
work,
mortgage.
And exactly. So like Gen X at the time, things were not as degraded as they are now. So Gen X sort of had to them, they may have seen it as it was a burden, and kind of it was to have that kind of do it on our own, go out and more of a frontier attitude, I think, than willing to take risks, a little more kind of revolutionary, renegade. Those are the sorts of words that come to mind for me. But in retrospect, from the millennials' perspective, it was like, well, you had the luxury of being able to go out and do that. We didn't even have that option. It sucks if we go out and try to do our own thing, and it sucks if we try to play according to the rules of the game. And then the Zoomers are just have been absolutely hosed. And you get that kind of TikTok effect here again, where not TikTok is in a clock, not as in the platform, where you have the idealistic boomer, the cynical Gen X, the idealistic millennial, the cynical Zoomer. And now we're over the next 10 years or so, we're going to see a huge number of the boomer generation die off. We're reaching that point where it's basically inevitable. And even more than that, they're going to be exiting the workforce. And so there's kind of a traffic jam that piled up behind them because I mean, what the last like 5 presidents have all been boomers. And I think Joe Biden might have been a silent, but just kind of barely.
Yeah. But I mean, he wasn't even all there.
Yeah, right,
Anyways,
right.
It's just Obama 2.0. Well, I mean, 1.5.
Yeah, right. So we haven't seen Gen X take the stage yet, really.
Yeah.
They haven't had their opportunity. And it seemed clear that the time is coming here where inevitably there's not going to be another boomer president after Trump. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Trump might get a third term, but there's not going to be another boomer president.
Just if we're going off, if we're taking with a grain of salt, a grain of salt, your analysis seriously. I don't see good leadership coming from an ironic standpoint. It has to be kind of idealistic. There has to be a lightning rod, a personality that can hold the attention and shape the attention into something that's positive action, not deconstructive action, which is the ironic, like any sort of ironic president or ironic leader. You're not going to have like real leadership.
It's going to look like Elon Musk.
Yeah, it's going to be very stochastic. It's going to be like, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then like going on to the next thing, and then like making fun of it, and like being untrustworthy in a broad sense, even though very productive in all these kind of very subsidiary narrow senses, but very bipolar, very intuitive / reactionary. There's a stronger word than just reactionary. He has these meltdowns, just like these tantrums. Like, what the heck are you doing, dude?
And it's not decent and proper to behave that way in public, which is kind of again, I don't want to push this so hard, but like the boomer millennial thing, that's not as much of a boomer millennial thing to just have the sort of crash outs the way that he does. Yeah. And he's also he may be like an archetypal Gen Xer. He's also very unique. He is a singular personality, but I guess there's a couple of different ideas here that I've drawn on from friends. One of them is a guy named Charles Padil, Whiskey and Ashes on Twitter. And he's talked about he's described what's coming as we're going to see, I believe it was Charles, it's going to be a Gen X head on a Gen Z body. And then, so there's that. Pin that idea for a second. Then,
in what position are we talking about? A position of authority or some sort of collective action?
I think both. That's going to be sort of the defining characteristic of we're in this liminal space right now. There's so many different epochal cycles, and you got the fourth turning, you've got all these different cycles, and it just so happens that all of them seem to point to this broad era right now, like a window of 40 to 80 years, kind of on a historical time cycle. Some of the cycles are about 80 years, but this particular time, there's so many major ancient and more recent cycle points that are ending right now. We're moving into a completely new age, whether you're talking about a realignment of the entire global economy, a change in the fundamental posture of America as the way America approaches being an empire. I personally think that America hasn't even started being an empire yet. I think America is maybe like in its adolescence as an imperial power. So then this other friend of mine, Jason Miranchuk, who would be a very good conversation. Miranchuk Now is his channel. He has this framework that he's developed in large part. He's borrowed it from Rene Girard. Mimetic theory has been an influence on it. But you have this archetype of the tyrannical father, and then the devouring mother, and then he's coined this term, the vengeful son. which is the spirit of the age that we are entering into now. We've been in the age of the devouring mother, and this is the age of the boomers. This is the boomer spirit, is the spirit of the devouring mother. And so you had the tyrannical father, which is the pre-war age, which is much more more authoritarian, more rigid, and you had mass bloodshed in that age. In the age of the tyrannical father, you had it was like one of the bloodiest ages of all time. Then these things are true both on the individual level and on the meta level, but you had absent fatherhood after that. Well, there's millions of men who died, and then
the ones
PTSD,
that came back were probably very emotionally scarred,
right?
Distant. Yeah.
And so then you have the emergence of this end of history globalist liberal order, which is extremely feminine in its personality. Very longhouse, yeah. So we've lived in this age of the devouring mother, which is the mother who, you could also say the smothering mother, which is the mother who is so, it's like the safetyism world, where she's smothering her children to keep them safe. She's protecting them from the tyrannical father. You know, that was the past age, was the age of all the violence and the big evil baddies, and that culminated in the most evil of all baddies. And now we need to do everything possible to ensure that there's never a baddie again. And which is a really, really insidious way to be a baddie, because now you're being a baddie while pretending not to be.
Well, yeah, hiding the baddies. I mean, there's no Return of the Strong Gods is another seminal essay that just that title alone just has so much mimetic weight or power to it. But in analyzing the woke phenomena, it's very Maoist in its behavior. It's very Stalinist in its behavior. It's kind of National Socialist in its behavior. It kind of has a lot of very potent symbols, marching orders, these flags, this pride, literal pride. But when you look, well, where's the tyrannical individual? There's no Mao, there's no Stalin, there's no Lenin, there's no Hitler. I almost forgot him. There's no FDR either. Everybody's just a cog in the machine, and everybody's kind of accumulating power to it. It's a distributed system, so it's very anti-authoritarian while being incredibly totalitarian.
Yes.
At the same time, it's all mycelium. Right. It's all like it's embedded in all this bureaucratic order and all these DEI initiatives. And I'm not even using DEI in the pejorative sense of diversity, equity, inclusion, but the way that it manifests as a bureaucratic apparatus of taking care of people, of dividing and conquering people so that their every need can be attended to and their individualism can be succored. And they can be taken care of by the system. And one of my observations at the phenomena at the Evergreen State College and a lot of the woke protests early on in the woke era at the colleges is that you had a lot of single women, these professors, coddling the black students, coddling the students because and forming this bond of the devouring mother with their extra special hyper-achieving what's it called? The self-esteem generation, the trophy, the consolation prize kind of transaction. That is the DEI spirit. So sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to fill that in because you're making me think of all these. Phenomena.
Yeah. And that is really, that whole spirit is very embodied in the millennial generation, has been absolutely one-shotted by that whole spirit. But now we're entering into this age of the vengeful son, which is, as Jason Miranchuk has said, is going to be an age of total violence. There's going to be, we've lived in this age of kind of like stasis, this like managed stasis, and we've had, we're going to have all this growth and everything, and then we have growth, and then that growth starts getting kind of fake, and then it gets faker and faker and faker, and people are like, there's something's not right here, and then we stop getting growth. Things start tailing off, and it's pretty clear to everyone now that there's major systemic issues everywhere, all over the place.
Yeah.
And in particular, we've had this preponderance of overbearing femininity, toxic femininity, the longhouse, and we have an incoming generation that has been disenfranchised across the board. They've been they can't buy a house, can't get a job. Their streets are flooded with foreigners who are hostile to them, and they're expected to just eat the bugs and live in the pod. And in many ways, many of them are already there. You have all the memes of the Goon Cave and the Coomers
Yes.
and so the Zoomer generation is. I've heard, I don't remember who said it, but someone said if you're a Zoomer online, you have a choice between being a Troon and a Nazi, and in some cases they're both. That's so the Zoomer generation is pretty schizophrenic. You can see this in the type of art that's emerging now.
Yeah.
Which an interesting phenomenon. I haven't completely unpacked this for myself, but as an aside, John Hughes movies were created by boomers. They were created by boomers, but they characterize the Gen X spirit. In the same sense, a lot of Zoomer art, the art that is beginning to embody what you would call the Zoomer spirit, the more cynical, what's the, like, not defeatist, there is defeatist in it, but kind of the meaninglessness, just absurdism. A lot of that is, some of it is produced by Zoomers now, but a lot of it is produced by like millennials or Gen X. So it's there's something interesting about the relationship between the generations. That there's like the brother generation, the ones that are next to each other, and then there's the ones that skip a generation that seem to have more of a parent-child kind of relationship. But anyways, so we're in this liminal time, crossing into this new age, and we don't know exactly what that new age is going to look like, but I think we can start, there's some threads here that we can start drawing on and tying together to see where we're going. And we've had the age of nothing ever happens, and we're entering an age where everything happens. And I think a lot of people aren't prepared for just how dramatic the changes that are coming are. I don't necessarily know what the changes are, but I know we're entering an age where it's like everything has been in this sort of stasis with the tension building and building and building and building and building and building. And then you get a sudden release and things change really, really rapidly, explosively even. And I think we're entering an age of complete realignment across the political, the metapolitical, the geopolitical. There's going to be, the terms of engagement are going to change. And some of this is because of technology. Some of this is the generational spirits interacting with one another, and some of it also is frankly the tempering element of the boomer generation's presence. I think that's something that we're not going to appreciate until it's gone. But they have a tempering effect. Now it's that there's a two-edged sword there, because that tempering effect also becomes smothering. And it has that smothering mother characteristic, but it does serve the purpose of kind of tempering things and not having.
Homeostasis,
Yes, that's going to go away, and we're going to have we're entering into an age. We're already seeing it now with the like political assassinations that are on the rise, and people are breaking out of. People are beginning to break out of prescribed molds and go wandering around looking for something different.
Say a flood is coming. Say you get a message. Say you've already received a message and you've been unconsciously or subconsciously working out. God told you to build an ark. What are you building your ark out of?
Well, I am an Orthodox Christian, so I would say that I know where the ark is. I know what the ark is. But for the sake of the thought exercise here, I would build it out of people. I think we're a communal species, and we have been the effect of however many 100 years of liberalism, wherever you want to start the origin point of liberalism. It is fundamentally it's deracinating and individuating and atomizing, while also kind of paradoxically, there's this great philosophy problem, the problem of the one and the many, and a characteristic of leftism, liberalism, these are sort of synonymous to me, but the characteristic of it is the destruction of borders, which is it's the pursuit of oneness, of absolute oneness. also known as egalitarianism. It's the destruction of borders, not just physical borders between nations, but also borders between concepts. Borders like marriage being between a man and a woman. That's a border. That's like a Chesterton's fence sort of thing. And the liberal impulse is for the breakdown and destruction of all borders.
Which is oddly paired with these neurotic outbreaks where they force everybody to wear masks and are hyper concerned with certain borders.
Yes.
Like there's this swapping of you can't suppress these instincts, or you can, they'll just pop up somewhere else.
Yeah, like if you think in terms of this is purely like theoretical, but if you think in terms of the like absolute oneness versus absolute manyness, so they're kind of the same.
Diversity,
they're kind of the same in a sense. The more different they become, the more similar they become. So
the more open, the more closed.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're living through the death of liberalism. I think. I don't know how long it's going to take. It may be. I think it could be. It could be 10 years until it's been.
Well, what do you mean by liberalism? Which liberalism are you speaking of?
Liberalism is a philosophy, not liberalism as a political thing, but liberalism, the liberal presuppositions about the world around us. It's a I think there's like principled reasons why some people are abandoning it. Some people are consciously choosing to abandon it because they've seen it doesn't deliver. And then there are some people who are just out of like a utilitarian kind of sense they're just not married to it, which is part of what you get when you get a generation like the Zoomer generation that is, well, what do we have to live for? Why should I believe in this thing this thing passed down to me from my parents? I mean, being an Orthodox Christian, I'm a big fan of tradition. And this is another one of these two-edged swords. When you throw away that tradition, like, it was a bad tradition, so it's probably good to find a new one. But at the same time, it also was your tradition. It was the thing that rooted you to your ancestors. And I think that there's a like that's one of the things that kind of paradoxically liberalism has undermined is the preponderance of people thinking in the liberal frame has undermined things like
hierarchy, valuing authority.
Yeah, valuing your ancestors, tradition, those sorts of things. It's like we're at the end of history, and yet we have to perpetually be in search of the new, which these things don't go together at all. If we're at the end of history, there is nothing new. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah, and there's no time.
We're in. I think it was kind of a way of like with the fall of the Soviet Union. I think to throw the boomers a bone. I think that the living through this time, even though things were relatively speaking rather easy on them, the system worked for them. If they went and did the thing, they'd get the reward for it. That doesn't mean they didn't work hard for it. They absolutely did work hard and they sacrificed and everything, but they were putting inputs into a system that returned outputs according to the inputs. Now the system doesn't return outputs according to the inputs. It doesn't matter how hard you work. You have to start moving orthogonally to the system really to be to find space. Yeah. So I think that's I think so. The boomers did get that. They had the system would return outputs according to the inputs, but it was also very destabilizing and kind of surreal and kind of, you've got the mass psyops. You've got the various different wars, the Vietnam War. You've got the Cold War. You've got the
war on terror, war on
terror. Yep.
War on poverty.
Yep. All the different wars. Yep. And you have the psychedelic emergence, the emergence of mass psychedelic use. You've got all the different psyops. You've got the explosion of mass media, suddenly being aware of things on a well, not necessarily minute by minute, but being like day to day, being able to find out about what's going on in other parts of the world was very, very disruptive to them psychologically, whether they realized it or not. And having to like hide under your desk because as a kid, because we might get hit by a nuke. Like imagine living in that environment. Like right now, we're like, oh no, Trump might go to Iran, and we might have an invasion over there, and you might get drafted or whatever. Like that's far removed from us, and it's very disabling and disruptive to people. Now imagine if it was like all those hypersonic missiles you're seeing, you might walk out your front door and see one coming down on you. Go hide underneath your desk. That would be really psychologically destabilizing to, especially to children. So they grew up in that world, and I think again we got to redeem the boomers. That's our the boomers had their shortcomings, but we have to redeem the boomers. We have to redeem our fathers. That's our role, is to redeem our fathers for the sake of our sons. Because the world is going to continue. The world's not going to end. It may look different. It may be better. It may be worse. But I think our responsibility is to try to make it better for the sake of our children, and start building fences as opposed to tearing them down. So I guess coming back to your question about what I would build my ark out of, I think I would build my ark out of people. We need a reemergence of community and beginning to kind of rebuild many of these different social technologies that have been denuded by mass global liberalism.
Mm-hmm. I think that the notion of community is worth looking at because, I mean, again, my origin story, I was at this place called Evergreen State College. They went through this total intersectional freak out.
I grew up in Washington State, by the way.
Okay, so you probably... Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
Yeah.
Beautiful place. You might have heard some echoes of the stories of Evergreen.
Yeah.
But they talked a lot about community love, and it was very communist, it's very culty. So when I hear people in your area, your age, and in your kind of your area of the noose sphere, taco sphere, they're talking about community. I sense like a different tenor and aesthetic to what that community thing means. And it's not this identity built out of identity. It's an identity built out of relationship. There's a way of relating. And that's why there was this little meme that splashed, or somebody did some people did a analysis of right-wing versus left-wing thought. And I'll try to remember to link the video in the description. But basically, it showed through this chart or graph that on the right wing, there's a much broader sense of differing views. And the further left you go, the narrower and the narrower amount of agreement there was. And that's been my intuition for years now, is that on the right wing, whatever the right wing is, it's not left. And there's a lot of difference in there, but there's an affordance for difference. There's actual distinctness and even a delight in, oddly enough, diversity. And it's not like celebrating diversity. Actually, it's very contentious diversity. Like the pagans don't get along with the Christians don't get along with the Nietzscheans don't get along with the tech bros, and they're all
Christians
kind
don't
of...
get along with the Christians.
Yeah, and the Christians don't get along with the Christians don't get along with the Christians. So it's very Protestant in a way. But still there's an affordance for a difference of belief. And the migration of certain, the probably more gray, more centrists from the left who were they grew up in the left for whatever reason, but they were too centrist for the left. They got kicked out. They end up somehow relating to the right or finding an audience on the right. And that serves them, and they all work together against the left for a time. The left gets destabilized, wokeness gets destabilized, and all of a sudden you see all these centrists trying to rearrange the furniture of this homeless camp that they've been in. And they fundamentally don't really understand the diversity of thought. And that's why you have this whole woke right kind of propaganda campaign trying to control everybody, trying to put the centrists as the left or as the correct ones over everybody else. They're trying to inhabit this thing called liberalism or liberty in a world where liberty doesn't fundamentally work right now, because the entire bedrock upon which liberty stood is completely destabilized. The bedrock of belief, the bedrock of homogeneity to one degree or another, whether ideological, ethnic, or linguistic, or any of these different tiers. So it's really interesting to see somebody who is kind of, I think I'm constitutionally liberal, but I'm more of like a Rush Limbaugh kind of liberal. Like I scoff at everybody, and I'm really interested in everything that's counter. I'm kind of a contrarian. Plus, I'm Gen X to such a degree that I don't really believe in anything so much as I understand that any given thing that's used to be believed in is just a conduit for people to connect and to do something through. To wrap up, how is community being formed amongst you all? Like how do you establish community? How do you know who's on your team? Or how do you know like what the right alignment is of all these teams? How do you not fear the Nazis or fear the people who are too far? How do you fear the right going too far every time it goes anywhere?
Let's see here. A few different kind of scattered thoughts that I'll try to tie together that I thought of as you were talking. First one was this, there's a graphic that's been going around Twitter the last few days of, it's like a spider web plot kind of the right versus the left.
Yeah, that's
and
what
the
I
left
was
is like
evoking. Yeah.
Yeah, super tight, and the right is all distributed, which there's something in there. I haven't completely unpacked this yet, but I'll do a little bit here, I guess, in real time. Some of the there's something that is binding, that's causing the left to consolidate around such a tight point. There's some sort of a binding thing there that is absent on the right, and I think that I think the way that we've used left and right for the past 80 or so years, I think is probably gonna, if I had to guess, it's probably gonna start drifting away from utility. There's endless debates. You've got globalist versus nationalist, and nationalist versus localist, and all these different things. I think fundamentally we're moving in a direction toward the restoration of hierarchy, restoration toward respect of authority and submission to authority and hierarchy. And this is going to come, either it's going to be forced upon us or we're going to embrace it. It's going to happen naturally because the human species can't survive. A war on borders and a war on hierarchy are the same thing. As soon as you begin making distinctions between things, you're going to start recognizing one of them is better than the other. And objectively, some things are better than other things. So once you've made those distinctions, now you have a hierarchy. This is, incidentally, I think is probably why the war on borders exists amongst the psychology of the left, because the war on borders is a war on hierarchy. And ultimately, leftism as a not just as a political thing, but almost like a biological force, is a war on truth, beauty, and goodness. It's a war on the things that naturally lead to hierarchy and authority. Because I think ultimately leftism is it's a war against God, and so, I'm
God
not
the Father. At least.
Yes. So, what was the question? Your question was, how are we connecting? What does that look like?
What's the mode of connection? How does one connect with another? How do you build this arc? Like, what's the glue, I guess, right? Or the nails?
I think the glue has to be sacrifice. It has to be sacrifice and skin in the game, and a commitment to submitting yourself to something larger than yourself. And the speaking as a Christian, as an Orthodox Christian, I'm submitting myself to the church, and that doesn't mean that the only people that I can be friends with then are other Orthodox Christians. Hardly. I've got a decently sized Discord server full of, we've got Orthodox Christians, we've got Catholics, we got Protestants. We used to have a Muslim, but he left. We have kind of generic atheists, but the thing that I think it's probably something like a metaphysical awareness. A metaphysical awareness of the necessity to submit yourself to the to truth, beauty, and goodness. That there is something that is objectively good about goodness. There's something objectively good that we have to submit ourselves to. A lot of this I heard from a lot of people.
Why do you think it requires submission or surrender to the good?
During COVID, I had a number of people. I started doing my show around that time, shortly thereafter, and I had a number of people who told me the same story, that they had been kind of wandering through life, sort of just kind of on autopilot. And, there's evil, there's demons, whatever. It was just kind of, sort of like a metaphor to them. And during COVID, they said they, like, for the first time in their life, they got the like, to the very bone, the sense that evil is real. And they, in some cases, it was even, they were like demons are real. Like, I'm seeing demons. I'm seeing people who act like demons. They're possessed. And I thought that, I thought we lived at the end of history. I thought this didn't exist anymore. And one of the things about, I think one of the fatal flaws in liberalism, ultimately, becomes its undoing, is its materialism and its dogmatic rationalism. Ultimately, there is a material world. There's also an immaterial world. And these aren't separate worlds. It's one world. It's one world that we engage with on a material basis and on an immaterial basis. And just because you deny the immaterial world doesn't mean that it's not there. It's denying the immaterial world is engaging with the immaterial world.
Yeah.
So there was trying to figure out how to make this as kind of condense this as much as possible.
Well, I've noticed in my investigations of the trans phenomena, especially how it has impacted the Zoomers, the inability for Gen X and for Boomers to look at exactly what's happening when a child is mutilated for the sake of an idea that didn't exist 10 years ago. They either have to go along with the justification that falls in the civil rights kind of orbit, where you do you. There's a liberatory process, and this is a part of like this individuation. This is kind of the path of individuation. But if they don't buy that, what they find is that they're looking evil in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them don't have the epistemology for horror. Like there's a couple of good Japanese horror films out there, but they're kind of just something that spooks you out. But they don't have the metaphysical, epistemological ability to reckon with the horrific and the evil.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have to say, well, there is evil, then you have to. There's very scant tools within the liberal, workshop for evil other than Hitler. Mm-hmm. That's all they have. Just authority, just rampant authority and homogeny. That's all they have for evil. It's like, well, okay, but when it comes draped in diversity, equity, and inclusion, using all the same tools, like there's no way for them to connect it. So they have to start to. That's the red pill. Like that's really like the kind of like dismantling of the liberal kind of beautiful. It's a beautiful space to work, given certain things are operating beyond it. Mm-hmm. Given that certain wolves are kind of sonic fenced out of your periphery.
Yeah, I think the world that the liberal world as described, a world where only good things exist and no bad things exist. Like I think it's great. I think there's many good things about that. But there's a very good book by Tom Holland called Dominion, where he delineates essentially how liberalism, the modern spirit, is derivative of Christianity. Even in its war against Christianity, it wars against Christianity on the basis that Christianity isn't Christian enough. Mm-hmm. So this is an observation I came to a few years ago, that liberalism is Christianity without Christ. It's trying to recreate Christianity, but it removes Christ from the center and replaces it with the individual. Mm-hmm. When people, they'll do these thought experiments about, especially I came out of the libertarian world where this stuff is just absolutely rampant. It's like pure distilled liberalism. You do these thought experiments of like like an individual's rights. Well, they're not thinking of a specific individual. They're thinking of this abstracted concept of an individual.
But a high functioning, high IQ Rawlsian specifically. You have to have like it's a rational agent. Therefore, they somehow have a flawless, rational mind that's kind of like what 130
Yeah,
degrees IQ, you know, in order to function in this world.
and that individual doesn't exist. It's not an actual person. It's a depersonalized individual. And I think you could even think of, I don't think you would be far off if you thought of that conception of the individual as an actual pagan deity. I think it serves the same function, but it's mimicking Christianity. And basically the I think the distillation of the liberal ethos is to say that the Father, God the Father, is an insufficient head for Christianity. He's an insufficient head for the church. And we're going to, in our human wisdom, we're going to replace him. It's the Tower of Babel over and over and over again.
Yeah,
this is the story of humanity. It's the rise and fall of empires is the rise and fall of the Tower of Babel. It's we're iterating through these cycles over and over again. And so one of the things that really pulled me into the Orthodox Church is the fact that the if you're looking at it from a theological perspective, the way that the Orthodox Church does its theology is it begins with the person of God the Father. God the Father, there is no abstract concept of person outside of God the Father. God the Father is the definition of personhood, and we are made in his image, which means that we are made in his image and in his likeness, which means image is like a sort of like a static definer, and then likeness is a progressive. It's like a dynamic. So we are made in his image, and we are made to become in his image, to become more and more like him. But we don't have personhood outside of him. Our personhood is defined by God the Father, the person.
Hence why one needs to submit or sacrifice toward the good, toward the true, towards the beautiful.
Because when we do that, that's actually what makes us human. We become more human the more we submit to God. Because this is the incarnation of Christ is the all history is Christian history. The incarnation of Christ it's the moment at which humanity and divinity become eternally united in the person of Christ. And so what this means is that God is human. The logos of the universe is human. We are not just another animal within this broad, vast universe and everything. No, the ordering principle of the universe is human. Reality has been created for us, for humanity. And God has eternally linked himself to us. So the more that you submit yourself to God, the more you seek to, even though you're never going to do it successfully, the more that you engage in the ritualistic practice of seeking to align yourself with the will of Christ by participating in his church, the more divinized you become, and also the more human you become. To become fully human is to become fully divinized, as Christ is. So Christ is an icon of the Father. You know, we can't see the Father, but we can see Christ, so we can engage with Christ. And he has a physical human body. He has genitalia. He has a blood type. He has a specific height. He has a shoe size. He has a physical human body. But he's also fully God at the same time. And we have been created. We were created higher than the angels. We are created to rule with God as part of the divine council. This is the ultimate upshot of Christianity. But in order to rule, you must submit. You have to submit yourself. This is one thing that modern Christianity, it has this weird liberalized sense that like acquiring political power or ruling or enforcing the law is somehow in opposition to Christianity, which is completely absurd. It is a Christian responsibility to rule justly, because the family is the fundamental unit of humanity: the father, the mother, and the child. And a nation is just an extrapolation, a scaled up family. So the father has a responsibility to embody Christ by submitting to him. Christ submits to his father. The father, so then the human father submits to Christ. The mother submits to the father, and the child submits to the father and the mother. And this is the fundamental unit of humanity. Then it begins to scale up, and you get multiple, you have the patriarch, and then the patriarch has his children. They get married, they have their children. They get married, they have their children. And then the patriarch then is the king. He serves the role of the king. He is the wise leader. And that's you had the tyrannical father. Well, the flip side of the tyrannical father would be like the wise king.
Yeah.
The flip side of the devouring mother would be like the prudent mother. And then the flip side of the vengeful son is the prodigal son. And the prodigal son, he goes off, he sows his wild oats, but ultimately he returns, he repents to his father, and then he redeems his father with his behavior. He is redeemed by his father, and he redeems his father in kind. So to see yourself as an atomized individual that is deracinated from your nation, from your family, from your history, from your people, from your ancestors, it's suicide. You're stripping yourself out.
It's the prodigal arc, though. Libertinism is right next door to liberty.
Yeah. Liberty. I would say liberty to do what? Like, what's the liberty to do what? You know, we don't have liberty to do evil. We have liberty to do good.
Yeah.
And so,
do you guys, well, just a really quick footnote. Sorry. Do the Orthodox, do you guys have transubstantiation in communion?
It's the doctrine of transubstantiation is a Catholic doctrine. If you're getting if you're getting into the theological weeds, we do believe it is the body and blood and blood of Christ.
I just wonder if anybody did a blood type check after transubstantiating the wine, because I'm really curious. If you said he's got a blood type, so I just
the Shroud of Turin has we know what his blood type is. There's Jack Posobiec did a really good sort of a breakdown of this recently. I didn't grow up believing this, but I've since become fully convinced the Shroud of Turin is 100% real. It's 100% authentic, which is absolutely frame breaking. It's completely mind blowing. But you should go.
Is this like a burial cloth put over Christ?
Yeah. It was the cloth that was wrapped around him, and it has essentially what it looks like is it was a cloth that was wrapped around a person that had blood and everything on them, and then there was something like a nuclear explosion inside it that imprinted the outline of the face and the blood and everything. It imprinted it into the fibers of the cloth in a way that it's very obviously not fake. The technical analyses of it's very obviously authentic. It couldn't be forged. And then there's historical chain of record and stuff with where it's been. But Jack Posobiec did a really good breakdown on it.
There can be no miracles at the end of history.
Right. Yeah. It's a very disenchanted world.
Yeah. And then, but the problem is correctly assessing the role of the enchanted world. And you have this smorgasbord of traditions to choose from. We've dismantled liberalism, and I've been a part of this. We've dismantled the cohesion of all these cohesiveness of these historical traditions, and now you can just go and do your yoga in the afternoon, and then maybe do a chant and have little flags on your thing, and then maybe go to a Christmas Eve service or whatever. Anybody who wants to seek meaning is going to be offered a variety of tonics and cures and uppers and downers and stuff. How have you found your antennae attuned by Orthodoxy to correctly assess the magical, the metaphysical, put it in its proper place, not lose your head and ground yourself in the real and the practical?
That's a really good question. I would say that it has. Let me say this. So I never expected to wind up at the Orthodox Church. I was raised Seventh-day Adventist, actually, if you've heard of Seventh-day Adventist.
Really?
Yeah, very different.
Kind of Swedish, Nordic.
It is, yeah. Swedish and Norwegian.
Is what's the ethnicity, generally speaking, or the founding of Seventh-day Adventist? Is it from that region, or is it an American?
It's American. It's
okay.
Seventh-day Adventist is definitely an American thing.
Okay.
It was something that my dad and my dad and I separated from my birth mom when I was young, and then he married an Adventist. He married my babysitter, and she was an Adventist. That's how we got into the church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So so one of the characteristics of Seventh-day Adventism is the belief that the Pope is literally the Antichrist.
Okay.
And so I grew up with the belief of the Catholic Church as being the organization that's led by the Antichrist. Never even heard of Orthodoxy until, I don't know, five or 6 years ago. Really? And then and I'd seen Orthodox priests and stuff before, but I was like, oh, those are just like some kind of weird sect of like dark Catholics or something. I don't know what they are. Catholics with beards. What
was your fallout or your evolution through the Seventh-day Adventists? And did you? I guess you left them. So what was the period between not being them and being Orthodox like?
It was most of my 20s. I went to an Adventist academy in Canada, and then I went to an Adventist college. I spent some time in Europe at going to a few different church schools and stuff over there, in Norway, in Sweden, and then traveled a little bit in Italy and Turkey.
So you're really in the church then?
Oh yeah. I went to evangelism schools. I did. I went door to door, doing kind of like the Mormon thing, going door to door and like a mission kind of, and giving Bible studies, putting on evangelistic series. I was very much. I wanted to be a youth pastor. I was fully in that. Then I went to college. I went to an Adventist college, but it's a notorious college within the Adventist world. The Adventist world is very odd because there's part of it that's extremely conservative. Like women aren't allowed to wear pants. The high school that I went to, you weren't allowed to have headphones, because they wanted to know what kind of music you were listening to. Men, you weren't allowed to have sleeveless shirts. There was no mixed swimming. Very, very conservative. Yeah. Then there's also, especially recently, there was a big liberal sort of uprising within the denomination, as has been the case with a lot of Protestant denominations of late. And I was homeschooled up until high school. And my parents kind of got involved in the broader homeschool movement, and which is much more like the Christian homeschool conferences and stuff are very Presbyterian. They're a lot more Calvinist, broadly speaking. Kind of trying to stay away from that hornet's nest just a little bit, because that gets down a whole bunch of rabbit holes. But so my parents began sort of moving away from the Adventist church. My dad had sort of a falling out with our local church, and he was starting to read more of the reformers and starting to be kind of like, John Calvin and Martin Luther and Zwingli and some of the other reformers of the day, and he kind of had this yearning, I guess, for like something that was a little deeper than what he was seeing in the Adventist church, and was becoming more and more convinced of like, he's kind of like pulling these threads, tracing these histories back. Meanwhile, I was doing the same thing, unbeknownst. This is completely separate. I was kind of doing the same thing. I was doing it from a political direction, because I'm like starting to question the Enlightenment. I'm reading Yarvin, and I read Dominion by Tom Holland, no. and Yarvin talks about, like, he has his what did he call him, the ultra Calvinist or something like that.
How Dawkins got pwned is essential reading for.
Yes. So I'm starting to question the Enlightenment. Well, then I'm like, okay, well, what about the Reformation? Maybe I need to start questioning things about the Reformation, because I'm seeing a direct thread from the Reformation to the Enlightenment. So if I start questioning things about the Reformation, well, then I need to go back a little bit further. But what's next? Yeah. And it was right at that time, like simultaneously with all of that.
Or where would you go?
Well, there was the schism in 1054 between the Roman Church or the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. But throughout this whole period of like my 20s, kind of, I wasn't attending church at all. I was fully removed from it. Never stopped believing in like, fundamentally would have called myself a Christian and would have absolutely been like, oh yeah, totally. But I was also exploring kind of Eastern mysticism and doing psychedelics and having psychedelic experiences, and very interested in like quantum mechanics and trying to figure out like what is the essence of reality? What does everything mean? And being very millennial. And a friend of mine, I can't remember who it was, but a friend of mine said you should listen to this podcast about it's a couple of Orthodox priests talking about like the spirit world. And they talk about like giants in the Bible and the Nephilim and all that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, that's like totally down my alley. I never thought I would have listened to a podcast by Orthodox priests, but I'll give it a shot. So it's Lord of Spirits is the name of it. They're friends with Jonathan Pajot. And that also got me into Jonathan Pajot as well. And it was just like everything just sort of kind of came together. The whole picture kind of clicked into place for me. I realized that despite being a devout Christian basically my entire life, I didn't understand Christian history at all. I'd never read the Church Fathers. I knew nothing about the first 1,500 years of Christian history. Yeah. And
you knew the Bible in the last 50 years or something like that.
Right. And so then I spent a while kind of being like, well, Catholic or Orthodox, Catholic, Orthodox, Catholic, Orthodox, because it gave me a renewed appreciation for Roman Catholics. I have an aunt who's a devout Roman Catholic, one of the sweetest women in the world. And she and I were able to really connect on this. When I told her that I was starting to sort of look into Orthodoxy, she was like, but my dad did the same thing. My dad started listening to Lord of Spirits almost to the day at the same time as I did without us talking to each other about it. It was like 2 months later, he was like, hey, there's this podcast I've been listening to by these Orthodox priests. And I was like, is it Lord of Spirits? He was like, yeah, how'd you know? I was like, I started listening. I've been listening to it. He said, how long ago did you start listening to it? And I was, how long ago did you start listening to it? And I said, oh, about 2 months ago. He's like, that's when I started listening to it. My dad has since been chrismated, received into the church, baptized and received into the church. And now my brother is as well.
Have you and your father done a podcast yet?
No, we haven't.
Okay, I'm just going to plant that seed in there. I think it'd never be even fascinating to listen to you two talk.
You guys would really get along well. You guys see the world very similarly. But I don't remember why I started going into all of that.
Well, we were talking about like re-enchantment and the proper frame and methodology for methodological process of reintegrating the spirit world, reintegrating beauty, truth, goodness in a way that's proper. Mm-hmm. Like what is the image of the man? Where does man stand? And then how has Orthodoxy allowed you to how has it enriched your imagination life, your spiritual life, your connection to beauty through what means?
I could talk about this for so long. And some of this is kind of just like you got to be there sort of thing. Like you have to experience it. Come and see. Like that's the from the Gospels. Just, all you can see is all I can say is just come and see. But I'll give some stuff here. So once I began understanding that the pagan gods are real. The Zeus, Hermes, all the different pagan gods, they're real. Those are real entities. Those are real spiritual entities. This has been the Christian tradition for forever. You even see it referenced in the Bible. They talk about, or they make there's allusions that you can draw that reference to the divine council, sitting in the council of the gods. There is God, capital G God, and then there are gods, and those gods are spiritual entities. The way Lord of Spirits describes it is they're vast cosmic intelligences, and they're very real. They absolutely have a tangible impact on the world, and our as humans, as people made in the image of God, our responsibility is to colonize the earth with the Spirit of God. The church is the body of Christ. And that's not a metaphor. It's a literal. It's a body. Like if you were to define a body, you might say a body is like, you might say a human body, but it's literally a body. It's not just sort of like, oh yeah, we're the body of Christ. We're actually his hands and feet here on earth. So he has a physical body. but then he also left us the church so that we have a pathway to him, a place that we know where we know he is. You know, we say that we don't know where the Spirit isn't, but we do know where the Spirit is. So we know the Spirit is in the church. That's not to say that the Spirit isn't elsewhere. I was talking to my subdeacon recently, and he said, you haven't always been in the Orthodox Church, right? And I was like, yeah, no, I just joined recently. And he said, so there was something that brought you to the church. And I was like, yeah. And he said, what was that? I was like, well, it must have been the Spirit. So he said, yeah. So the Holy Spirit is outside the church. Mm-hmm. It is present outside the church. We don't know where. We can't say for sure, but we do know that the Spirit is present within the church. And the practice of Christianity, it was originally called the way. Christian was actually like a disparaging term that was used to describe followers of Christ. But early on they called it followers of the way. Well, the way of what? The way of living, the way of comporting your life. Human beings are ritualistic animals. Every single thing we do is ritual. Some of our rituals we call habits, but they are rituals. They're physical things that we do for physical reasons, but also for metaphysical reasons. And the rituals that you engage in on a regular basis are what define you. They don't just define you in the sense that they're like sort of like the abstract meaning of you, but they actually have a literal physical effect on you. So when we believe within the Orthodox Church, we believe that when you venerate an icon, when you pray to a saint, when you pray to Christ, when you pray to his mother, each of these things that you're doing, each of these rituals, they are actually having a both a physical and metaphysical impact on you. They're physically changing you. You are becoming more and more like Christ in the sense that your very essence is being divinized.
You're getting Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, right. And if you attend like an Orthodox liturgy, it's profoundly beautiful. It's all the senses, all your senses are being stimulated. There's incense, there's the chanting, there's the icons, there's candles, there's the vestments of the priest, and there's meaning in absolutely everything. It's a deep, rich tradition that also is a tradition that can be fashioned to and has historically been the practice of the church to reflect and embed the local traditions and customs within it. Mm-hmm. So this is another thing that Christianity is not a deracinating. This is like one of the Nietzscheans and stuff like to say that Christianity they properly recognize that the sort of modern shitlib world is derivative of Christianity. And they think that that means that this is like the essence of Christianity, but it's actually the other way around. It's derivative of Christianity in the sense that you would never get a world that looks the way you wouldn't get these. Liberalism wouldn't emerge in a world that didn't already have Christianity in it.
It hasn't emerged in Islam, no matter how many bombs we throw at them. Yeah. It just hasn't happened there yet.
Right. So, a world that never had Christianity wouldn't get liberalism. It would get something different, but it wouldn't get liberalism. But that's because liberalism is a departure from Christianity. It's a heresy. It's a Christian heresy.
A falling out. Perhaps.
Right. And Christianity has always. This is why within the Orthodox Church, people will say, "Well, which one?" Because there's like a Serbian Orthodox Church and Russian Orthodox Church and Greek Orthodox Church. Well, they all celebrate the same liturgy, but there are different cultural customs and stuff. Like, when's the proper time to make the sign of the cross? These sorts of things that are. But it maintains the identity because Christ created the nations. The nations were created, and they were created for a reason, and Christians were exhorted to go into all the nations and baptize them, not make them not nations anymore, but to baptize them, make them Christian nations. They're still nations. They still have an ethnos, and that ethnos it ought to be preserved because again, it itself is derivative from the family spirit. So,
since stumbling on Orthodoxy, there's I don't know when it announced itself to my little channel, or my investigations, my conversations. But one thing that has struck me about it, well, one thing I had to unlearn is calling it Eastern Orthodox or Greek Orthodox. I had to like figure out, because I always did that. So it's just Orthodoxy, putting that first, and then all these other, this is the thing. It's like, it's not denomination.
Jurisdictions is the
jurisdictions. It's variations on a theme. More or less. And so one thing that's interesting in talking to these neophyte American Orthodox Christians is that, well, how is Orthodoxy going to, and even the priests out here, how is it going to adapt to the West? And how is the West going to influence it? Because it has been kind of sealed hermetically from the West by the Iron Curtain and by history, by Catholicism, and now that it's emerging and making contact with modernity, I wonder, how is it going to respond to modernity, both by being affected by it and by affecting it? And it's an interesting, rich, fertile ground, and I'm wondering, it's going to take some generations to sort out, but I'm really fascinated or curious as to how it's going to evolve.
Yeah, it's the first Orthodox church in the United States was in the 1780s, I believe. They came over through Alaska. They came down the West Coast. So there's been Orthodox missions along the West Coast of the United States for 250
And they plugged into
years.
the Native American community.
Yeah.
Principally, yeah.
Yep. And then the Spaniards, when the Spaniards came in from the south, there were overlaps there as well. So there's been more Orthodoxy within the United States than even I realized when I first started sort of exploring it. But it is absolutely, it's definitely relatively niche. But it over the last 5 to 10 years, it's definitely exploding. I don't know exactly how it's going to what's going to happen in its encounters with the West. I do know that it's going to mean a lot of suffering for Orthodox Christians, because that's a characteristic of it.
Defining characteristic of your religion. Yeah, you got to suffer. You can't just sacrifice abstractly.
Yep.
You got to carry a cross. You got to get nailed to something. Some whips and some crowns of thorns.
Suffering is, this is to quote my friend Jason Miranchuk again, that suffering is the thing that he said really like kind of broke his brain, was when he realized that suffering is contained within God's love. That suffering is a grace that we're given, because it's what indicates to us what, like, our proximity to God. Your as an example, when you read in the Bible, the Israelites, when they would rebel and they would start worshiping other gods and whatever, and God would remove himself from their presence. That was the way I always read that. The way I've seen every modern Christian I've ever seen has read that, is that this is like God is angry. God is angry. You guys are misbehaving. I'm not going to hang out with you anymore.
Yeah.
And that's not what it is. God is removing himself as a mercy, because to be in his presence while
committing atrocities,
while bearing the stain of sin, will kill you. It will kill you. Yeah. Because your sinfulness in the presence of his holiness, you will be utterly consumed. So he removes himself from you as a grace, so that you have time to repent and come back to him. Yeah. And then when we are removed from God, because God is the source of life, when you're removed from him, you experience that as suffering, which is imagine if you didn't have that, if you didn't know whether you were close to God or not close to God, or what have you. We're given this signal that we can, if we listen to it, if we tune into it, then we can direct ourselves toward him. And there's a spiritual organ called the noose. You can think of it as sort of like a mirror, kind of in your brain. It's the thing, or it's also sort of like a
tongue.
Yeah, like the way that we access
spiritual tongue.
The spiritual, yeah, like a receiver for accessing, sensing spiritual things. Yeah. And the stain of sin has made it's made our noose dysfunctional. But by engaging in the disciplines of the rituals of the church, it's not just that not just that sort of in a kind of a vague abstract sense, like, oh, you're learning discipline. No, it actually literally changes. It begins to clear your noose. And I think the pineal gland and the noose, there's probably some sort of overlap there. Again,
just think of this articulatable appendage thing. But
yeah. So you're the more clear your noose becomes, the more magnificent is the glory of God, and correspondingly, the smaller and more insignificant you recognize yourself to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the only thing you can do is fall down and submit yourself.
Yeah.
This is when you begin to see God more clearly, the only thing you can do is submit yourself to him. But then that's where when the prodigal son comes back, he's wasted his father's money, he's made a mockery of him, he's broken his heart, he's left him. But when he comes back to him and he's like I've been living with the pigs, eating pig food, and can I at least just be your servant? And he comes back to him, and his father sees him coming. He's sitting there looking for him, waiting for him. He sees him coming down the road, and he runs out to meet him. And he embraces him, and he says, "Welcome home, my son." It's like he never left. This is the way God receives us. Welcome home. Please, we're gonna have a massive feast. We're gonna have a party because you came home. And for every single one of us, there are cheers in heaven for every single Christian, for every single human who wakes up, realizes where they are, what time it is, and they return to the Father. They repent. They are redeemed by him, so that they can then begin redeeming the world around them. So when you submit yourself to the Father, you realize then that you have a responsibility to submit yourself to everyone around you, to sacrifice yourself for them, to take on their suffering as your own, make it your own, redeem it through your own life. And then correspondingly, when you do that, the more responsibility you take on, the more responsibility you're given. And responsibility is power. The more responsibility you have, the more power you have. And then that power brings with it a responsibility to use that power justly. And so this is where the notion that Christians, like the libertarian, there's like sort of a libertarian Christian strain where they say it's wrong to seek or to use political power. This is exactly wrong. The notion that it would be that Christians shouldn't seek or use political power is patently absurd, because the corollary to that is only evil non-Christians should have political power. That doesn't make any sense at all. No, we have an obligation to seek power, but not the power for its own sake, but because to seek the power is the same as seeking the responsibility, which is the same as submitting yourself. Within the hierarchy of the church, there's little trinities all the way through the hierarchy of the church. So you have the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Then you have you could say like the Father, the Son, and the like the patriarch, the bishop. You have the bishop, the priest, and the deacon, or the layman. Kind of, you could do it either way here. Then you have the father, the mother, and the child. There's the hierarchies and these trinities are all over the place. And the priest is responsible for the souls of everyone who you might say is quote unquote below him in the hierarchy. The hierarchy properly understood would actually be like an upside down triangle, where the one who is highest on the hierarchy is the one who is at the bottom, who bears the weight of everyone else on his shoulders. Yeah, this is termed like servant leadership is maybe like the more modern term that people would use to describe this, but it's a very real thing. So there is a correspondence to submitting oneself, diminishing oneself, and being elevated because of it. So go ahead.
Oh no, finish your thought.
Well, we have our hierarchies are broken. There's been this war on hierarchy, war on authority, war on and then also a war on suffering. Because here's the thing, like suffering is actually a grace that's been given to us. And when you realize that, when you begin embracing that, that's one of the most liberating things ever. If I'm suffering, I'm drawing closer to God. Like this is I'm hearing the voice of God. You will hear the voice of God in your suffering if you begin listening for it. And a war on suffering is a war on a human being's ability to identify the presence of God, ultimately. So we've had this war on hierarchy, and an idea I've been working on for a little bit here is that there's a lot of people, even I myself, have said that we have an absence of good leaders. I think we also have an absence of good followers. Most people are intended to be followers. They will be followers, and they need to be good followers. This is kind of one of these, which is bludgeoning liberalism today, but one of these liberal things is egalitarianism, equality, no kings, no rulers, liberty, do as thou wilt. This is just absolutely catastrophic to the human species, because it's random, it's chaotic, it's anarchic. I say this as a recovering anarchist. If you think of this as kind of like nodes on a like a hierarchical network or something like that, when you have someone who serves their role, they have their responsibility to those above them, and they have the responsibilities to those below them. When they abandon their responsibilities, they start going off and doing whatever. If someone else abandons their post to go fill that, then now you have two nodes that are messed up. And if you're going lateral, that's one thing. But when you start going up down on the hierarchy, when you have people who are not tuned to be the leader, who are trying to step in and act as leaders rather than following, now you get multiple nodes on the hierarchy that are dysfunctional, versus the humility and the ability to surrender, to submit yourself to the proper place in the hierarchy. Even if you don't believe in it, even if you don't know why, even if you don't understand it, just simply doing your duty, doing your job within your defined, prescribed domain, not trying to reach out too far beyond you. This is kind of a Jordan Peterson thing, like clean your room. Focus on your local domain, and then you can begin working out in concentric circles from there. But if you try to start with, I'm going to fix the world, you're taking yourself out of your place in the hierarchy, unless you are the person whose responsibility it is to fix the world. Like Donald Trump has a different set of responsibilities that are incumbent upon him. He has a different spiritual mandate than I do. Mm-hmm. For me to try to take on Donald Trump's responsibilities would be improper. I have my domain, he has his domain. Same for all of us. I think we do need more leaders. We also need better leaders. We also need better followers. We need people who are willing to follow, who are willing to submit themselves and recognize that our leadership is appointed by God. Political leaders are appointed by God. Political power is granted by God. Sometimes it's a blessing to us. Sometimes it's a curse to us.
You get the leaders you deserve. I forget who said that, but it was somebody.
Yes, exactly. It is a judgment unto you. You can see this all throughout the Bible too. This is the entire story of the Israelite nation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's obvious that Orthodoxy has given you many gifts in your life since coming to it, but has it given you a wife?
I was already married.
Oh, you were married beforehand.
Yeah.
How is it? If you don't mind me asking, this is beyond the scope of like a humble, abstract interview, but how has it affected your marriage? How has it integrated you with your bride? She
is so much better than I am. She is perpetually puts me to shame. She's so much more faithful.
That's how you know you're married.
Yeah. She's so I'm kind of all over the place, and she is just steady. And she had virtually no background with the church at all. She told me she went to a Lutheran church that when she was younger, that she remembers because they had good donut holes in during the coffee hour. Like that was her relationship to the church before. But we got married, and then my son was born in 2020. He was born in October of 2020. So that was a very interesting year. And I was going through this sort of beginning to discover Orthodoxy and starting to listen to it and starting to get my brains completely rearranged. And I was doing my podcasts. I had people who were replying, who were sending messages and commenting on the chat and everything, and saying, thank you so much for doing this, for talking about all this stuff. You're because I've been listening to you, I've started going back to church. I've gone and gotten raises at work, or I've decided to quit my job and go start a business or whatever. And I was like, I'm not even going to church. Like, I haven't gone to church in a number of years. I'm interested in this stuff, and I'm talking about it and kind of working through it out loud on my show, but I'm not even going to church. So I started feeling very convicted about that. I was like, if I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to keep talking about these sorts of things, and clearly the impact is that people are receiving this in like a spiritual way, a spiritual exhortation, then I need to ensure that I'm pointed in the right direction. I need to orient myself toward God properly. I need to go begin putting skin in the game here myself. So I looked to see what the nearest parish was to us to go check it out. And it was, are you familiar with Father Josiah Trenum?
No.
Okay, he's probably one of the most famous Orthodox priests that's producing content online. He's just a living saint. He's wonderful, glorious man. His parish was the one I was following his channel and watching a lot of his videos and everything. His parish was 20 minutes from our house in Southern California. So, and Amy, with my son being born, my wife Amy, with my son Eastwood being born, she was like, I want to go to church. I mean, I want to find a church. I want to raise him as a Christian. And I was like, yeah, that's good. We should do that. And so I was talking about Orthodoxy and telling her about stuff, and she was like, well, let's go to this Orthodox church and check it out. And we went there, and she absolutely fell in love with Father Josiah. Just adores him. We actually gave our son when he was baptized, we gave him the Christian name Josiah. So we started attending there, and then things with work changed, and we wanted to get out of Southern California for obvious reasons, and we ended up moving to Texas in January of 2022, and we're looking for a parish here locally. And a friend of mine that I knew from libertarian podcasting days, his name is Buck Johnson. Counterflow is his podcast. He'd be another good interview. He lived here locally, and he was like, hey, you should come check out our parish. And it's just a little mission parish, but so we started attending it, and it's been great. My wife is just so much more steady and consistent and faithful than I am. It's just there's a simplicity to that. Like, I'm so bad. I talk about submitting and suffering and all this. I'm speaking about all this. I'm terrible.
You're too much of a spur to keep it up.
Yeah, I'm absolutely terrible. I've got pride, ego issues. I'm lazy. I'm terrible.
Yeah, I hear you on all those accounts. So, what's up with Kingpilled? What's your work? Where's it come from? What are you focusing on right now? What's the mission of your content?
So Kingpilled came from I was co-host of a libertarian that kind of morphed into a business podcast called Wealth, Power, and Influence with Jason Stapleton, and I started kind of building up an audience of people who liked my takes on the show, and they were telling me I needed to start my own show. And then this is right at the time that I started reading a lot of Moldbug. This would have been like 2019, 2020. I'd been reading him for a while, but I had another friend that I was talking to about it a lot, and he was like, you need to start a podcast. You need to start talking about this stuff publicly. Do your own show. I was like, yeah, but I don't know what to call it. Like, I have to have a name. I don't want to. Okay. And my name's boring. The Matt Erickson Show is boring. I don't want. I need a name. And so finally, we were having a conversation, and he said we were talking about ANCAPs, and he was like, man. He was like, you need to. I said, man, we need to go Kingpill these mofo's. And he was like, Kingpilled. There it is. I was like, okay, yeah, Kingpilled, that works. So I called it Kingpilled, and now today, I have a show called the Astrolab that I do. It's a roughly daily show during the week. Live stream. I usually go for 3, 4, 5 hours even, and it's like a variety show. I very active on Twitter. And Twitter is like it's the town square. It's where everything's happening. All the news either starts on Twitter or or proliferates on Twitter, and then everything's downstream from that. So I've been days or weeks ahead of everybody else on your news events for a decade now.
Yeah, I know, right?
I created a Twitter account in 2009, I think. I've been on there for a long time, so I've seen it go through a lot of iterations.
Yeah.
So the gist of the show is basically just whatever caught my attention on Twitter, and it's a lot of geopolitics, economics, Bitcoin, tech, culture, all kinds of stuff.
Did you see I haven't watched the whole interview, and so of course it's a clip, and I have to wrap it up soon. So one more little juicy topic. So Tucker Carlson, he's this newscaster kind of guy. Well, he used to be. Now he's just another podcaster like you or I.
Right.
We're basically the same. This. Yeah, it's just like you, Rogan, me, and Tuck. It's just a spectrum. He interviewed Ted Cruz, senator, presidential hopeful at one point or another, about Iran and Israel. And there was a lot of dunking. I just saw this clip just before we started where Ted Cruz says that those who... I'm going to butcher it a little bit. It was just fascinating, and I've been calling this out. I had Carrie Smith on. She's in Austin. Wonderful lady, and she was defending the concept of the woke right, and I was kind of arguing against the concept of the woke right. And one thing that we landed upon was that the particular bent within evangelical American Christians to idolize Israel. And Ted Cruz summarized that by saying that those who support Israel will be blessed. Those who go against Israel will be cursed. And Tucker was like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about Benjamin Netanyahu? Which Israel are we talking about? Are we talking about the country right now? And it seemed like Ted Cruz was saying that this country of Israel, it is our divine duty as Christians to support. That seems messed up to me. But I'm just, I've had run-ins with people who are very strong, hardline Zionists, and they really get displeased if I say anything that's questioning the power, the legitimacy, and the divine right of Israel to do what it wishes to do. What is your take, however you want to tackle that? Is that proper that this country should be, that America should be Israel head, American body, and that's the mission. That's the divine Christian mission of our nation.
I'll say this as gently as I can. I think that idea is utter horseshit.
Okay.
I think the Israel is the church. The church is Israel. The nation founded in 1948 if it is referenced in the Bible, it's referenced in the Bible in a way that is the modern day supporters of Israel would not like at all. It is there's a lot of deep ancient history related to that. This is a very, very old phenomenon that goes back a long ways. But essentially, you had the you could say like the Hebraic tradition, and the Messiah, the foretold Messiah came. And at that point, there was basically a split. There was the followers of the Hebraic tradition who recognized the Messiah and embraced him and followed him and became known as Christians, followers of the way, and then Christians. And then there was the followers of the Hebraic tradition who rejected him as the Messiah and then splintered off in a whole bunch of different directions. In AD 70, they got scattered, and since then have been a wandering people without a homeland. And what we call Judaism is actually, there's many Judaisms. It's it's splintered. It went in a bunch of different directions. And I mean, guys, depending on your perspective, Christianity kind of did too. But I see it as Orthodoxy and then Roman Catholicism, and then
of course
then you have,
because you're a supremacist of your own right.
exactly. And then you've got your like 50,000 Protestant denominations or whatever. But
sorry, 50,001. There's mine.
Yes, it's yours too. Yeah, right. So
the modern state of Israel. What is the Christian's proper conception of that from your point of view? And of course, this is going to have a lot of disagreement. It's funny that I'm putting it at the end here because everybody's probably like, if they lasted this long, like what?
Yeah. I would say so as a Christian, I would say our duty to the people of Israel is to treat them as we would human beings. Even though if I went to Israel as a Christian, in some parts of it at least, I'd be spit upon. That they are not fans of me and my kind. They're still Christians.
Do you have a particular? Have you been there? I mean, I'm just wondering if you have any particular romantic or spiritual sense of the importance, symbolic or otherwise, of Jerusalem, of that holy land, if that holy land has some sort of holiness.
I do believe that, that there is, this is one of the things with Orthodoxy, talking about enchantment, that there is such a thing as a holy place, like holy ground. The presence of a saint, you have relics, you have
that was when I visited an Orthodox church about a year ago. I was struck by the consecratedness of the altar of the I know it's not an altar, whatever it's called, that
it is the altar, the behind the iconostasis you have the altar, or within the iconostasis is the altar, and then within the actual altar itself, every altar has a relic of a saint in it. Because we don't believe that there is a like immaterial and a material world. There's one world that is we experience it materially and immaterially, but there is such a thing as holy ground and deifying physical. Like when you plant a church on a place, it's been an ancient Christian practice to plant their churches on top of pagan worship sites. Because you're quite literally deifying that thing. You're purifying it with the presence of Christ. So, and then we believe
and appropriating all of the previous worship.
Yes, and then there's a phenomenon of incorruption of the incorruptibleness of saints. That you have saints who die and then they're exhumed later on, and they've hardly because they're in the process. They're on the journey toward perfect deification, and that includes their physical material bodies. We are not separable from our bodies. Our bodies are part of us, and they will be redeemed as well.
If you're lucky.
Yes, true.
Or
yes,
holy.
Yeah. If you're holy, yeah. So
Israel probably does have,
Yes, like if Christ walked on ground in places, like his physical presence there has changed the nature of that place. So his burial, and there's within the Middle East there are actually within so-called Palestine it's anciently historically Christian. There's some of the oldest Christian churches in the world there. There's a church I think it's in Turkey. Somewhere I don't remember where it is, but there's a church where if you go into an Orthodox parish, you'll see that there's always the bishop's chair or the bishop's throne. If you're standing at the iconostasis, it's off to the left, and there's a church I want to say it's in Turkey somewhere, where that bishop's throne, the last person who sat on it was St. Paul. So it's one church, one tradition for 2,000 years and the last person who sat there was St. Paul. So he actually physically visited that building. The liturgy that Orthodox churches celebrate most Sundays is the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, which was written in the 400s. It's a 1,600-year-old liturgy that we're still celebrating. So it's a very, very, very slow to change. The tradition is very, very slow to change. But there absolutely is holy ground there. It's and I don't have like animosity toward the Israeli people at all. Like I think many of them are perfectly fine people. I definitely have problems with the state of Israel as a political entity, and there are the history of Judaism is of the Judaisms since their rejection of Christ is pretty dark. There's very, very dark stuff within that, and figuring out what I can say and can't say on YouTube.
Well, we don't have to go down that particular rabbit hole. I don't even know why I brought it up. It's just that's a little thorn in my side, specifically that evangelical Christians within the United States have this idea that we need to bow or submit ourselves to this holier nation than us. It rubs me the wrong way. And I don't know how that's going to go, because it doesn't seem like to be a I think it's a politically it's we talk about the left and the right morphing. Like Israel is definitely, or like the current incarnation of the Israeli government and all the power that they wield, whether on the books or off the books. But you can see that there's a lot of power in our country that's directly tied to that country. That's going to be a politically volatile kind of point of tension.
I also think that it's I mean, if you look at polling with younger people, and like obviously dispensationalism is a extremely boomer thing. It's I just saw a graphic the other day that showed the average ages of a whole bunch of different Christian denominations in the United States, and it was like virtually all the dispensationalist types were all like their average age is like late 50s.
And then, that is what's dispensationalism? That's the like the way that the vector by which we will enter the millennium is through a political reality of Israel on the ground.
Yeah, it's like the John Nelson Darby, the Schofield Bible, the belief that Christians have to submit themselves to Israel, to the political entity that is the nation of Israel, and like the Christian Zionism, Jews for Jesus. These are all kind of all interconnected. But yeah, I don't remember what I was saying.
Generationally, that's gonna.
Oh yeah, the ages. So the younger generations are completely checking out on Israel. I think that their grasp on American politics has an expiration date, and it's not that far from us. Yeah. And talking about the circling back kind of to the tech guys, as I was watching these, reading about these and listening to the things they said, and when likes were public on Twitter, I'd go through and read their likes and kind of try to build a profile of them. Many of them they call themselves Zionists, like devout Zionists. For example, Palmer Luckey at Anduril and Oculus, and Alex Karp, the head of Palantir. These are guys that have described themselves as Zionists. And me and my people are not particular fans of Zionists, but I also think that Zionism is dead. It's dying. It's like the last remaining holdover of the 20th century, and it's kind of just a really incoherent, sort of aberrant ism that has been around for a while, but it just doesn't really make any sense. Nobody thinks in these terms, in the Zionist terms, really about the characteristic of a nation state and how a nation can behave with respect to its neighbors, and like this notion that you and another nation are obligated to like bow down and support undyingly the behavior and activities of another nation,
or you hate
kind of
them.
Absurd.
Yeah, either you obey or you hate. Like there's no. It's crazy. Within these a lot of these Zionist people, there's like they call themselves Zionists because they're like, well, I like Israel. You know, I think Israel's great. I travel there. I've got friends there. They've got big VC sector and all that sort of thing. It's a beautiful place. You know, but I think there's a distinction that has to be made between the people who are who believe that America exists for the sake of Israel, and the people who believe that America exists and so does Israel. And America ought to exist, and so should Israel. They should be allies. You know, they're our greatest ally. You know, I don't really think they're a very good ally, but you know, there's lots of people who do, and I understand why they may think that way. I think it's kind of absurd, but I believe that we're sort of moving in a direction, and maybe even with what's happening immediately right now with the Iran-Israel thing, we're moving in a direction where. I think the United States is actually, as a matter of foreign policy, I think the United States is actually withdrawing itself from the Middle East, and we're seeing this process playing out. It may not necessarily look like it immediately on the surface, but I think Russia is doing the same, and I think that's part of what we're seeing right now. I think we're seeing a trade being made. Russia is giving up Iran. And the Western powers, or at least the Western powers as led by the United States, are giving up Ukraine. They're making concessions on both sides, and Russia and the U.S. are both sort of withdrawing themselves from that whole big quagmire. So quagmire is the polite way to put it.
Yeah. But I think there is not going to be the political will within America to continue treating Israel like this as the younger generations come up. I don't want people to be like murderously hostile to Israel because I'm a Christian, and I think that being murderously hostile toward another people is really bad for you. I think it's corrupting to your own spirit.
Yeah. I resent being treated in such a way that you either support this thing or you hate these people.
Absolutely.
Like that is absolutely. Want to talk about the woke right?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
That's identity politics, guilt by association, guilt by Kafka traps up and down the place, Mott and Bailey's, all the things. It's just I resent it, though. I as somebody who wants to maintain the vibe of my platform as somebody who's open-hearted, I do need to give Zionists, whether self-described or other described, a fair shake. But it's just weird when Christians act this way.
Yeah.
Like, I understand self-interests of Jewish people or the Israeli people for their own hegemonic purposes, to get as much power from the United States to manipulate, do whatever you need to secure your people, to secure your land, even, all the wars you need to do. I understand that, but to be manipulated, to be told that I owe you something or that my religion needs to bow down to this state, and then watch people who are religious leaders on my side of this religious, tableau say things that are just, it's just outright idolatry. It's just pure idolatry.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. Yep.
It's commandments.
It's heresy. It's a absolutely, like, Christian Zionism is 100% a heresy. It's absolutely, and it's throughout the history of the church as well. There are many fathers of the church who have written about this whole subject, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The notion that Christians owe some sort of obeisance to the nation of Israel, or that if you wanted to get really theologically into the weeds about it, the Jewish, like the modern day Judaism Jewish God is not. We do not worship the same God. Christians and Jews do not worship the same God. We may talk about him he's a lot of language, a lot of things that are similar, but the historic Christian position is that we're not worshiping the same God. So, same with Christians and Muslims, we're not worshiping the same God. This is the historic Christian position. And so, the idea that you would have to, that America owes some sort of debt to Israel, or that we are obligated as Christians to support Israel, give them some sort of special status is, I do think that there's, going back to like the Holy Land notion, the idea that there is something that's special about that area, because that is the place on earth where God chose to be born as a human. So there is something that's distinct and special about that. And I think that's part of the reason why there is such a kind of a psyop, or whatever you want to call it. The idea that no, actually this is their land. I mean, that it's one thing to say, okay, this holy Christian site is actually, it belongs to this other group. Like that's bad enough. But then to say your holy site belongs to this other group and you have to submit yourself to that group is just like, it's like adding insult to injury. It's preposterous to me. I saw a tweet today. Someone said something about, like, imagine being a racial supremacist for another race. Being a racial
happens all the time,
but it's not
man.
yours. Yeah.
Welcome to the essence of the shitlib right there.
Yeah. Yes,
the supremacist for somebody else's race. Yeah. Matt Erickson, you're a fascinating guy. I'm sorry to close it off. We talked for a long time. I got to bounce though, but I'll link to your work down there in the description. Where can people find you? What are they going to find when they get there?
So Twitter is at real Kingpilled. I've been on YouTube, but I'm actually beginning to migrate over to Kick because it's a better platform for doing lengthy live streams like I do.
Okay. Yeah.
So kick.com/Kingpilled. And also maintain the YouTube channel. I just am starting to kind of sunset the live stream thing on it. What will they find when they get there? So there's right now I'm doing two different shows. One of them is the Astrolab, which is mostly daily, Monday to Friday. and that is, like I said, variety show. We have a lot of fun. I share my screen and we watch stuff. Sometimes I just scroll through the Twitter timeline and talk about whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Every week, Thursday night, Jason Miranchuk and I do a show called Network Armageddon Electric Boogaloo. And that's just the two of us just picking a topic and talking about it. We watched the Yarvin debate with the Harvard professor and broke that down. Yeah. And then also I have a project that I've been working on called EWBSX, which stands for Eternal White Boy Summer Radio. This is there's an app, Google and App Store. It is a 24/7 curated audio experience for it very much taps into the nostalgia. If you go listen to it, it's a bunch of banger songs and audio clips, and it should evoke sort of like a GTA radio or this kind of satellite radio era, coast to coast. Very nostalgia for the 90s and 2000s is big right now, and I know that there's a lot of people who they sit and they listen to stuff and they have like all their podcasts and they're scrolling and everything. But sometimes maybe it's good to just sit back and just allow yourself to be guided along this curated audio experience. You don't know what's coming next. Remember how we used to listen to the radio and you didn't know what song was coming next? You had no idea. You didn't. Now we have like the curse or the burden of too much choice. And so let us be your algorithm. So the app is on it's free to download on the Google and Apple app stores. It's called EWBSX, the Cyberbully.
Excellent.
So that's or EWBSX.app is the website. So that's a project I've been working on with some buddies.
Excellent. Matt, thank you so much for your time. We had a great conversation. I will again link to all your work down below.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Too.